everybody and welcome to Rocco Baby Crochet. In this quick tutorial I'm just going to be showing you how we do the chain stitch and how we create our foundation chains to build up and create our projects. So you're going to want to grab yourself your yarn and the corresponding hook. Now if you are an absolute beginner, I would recommend that you use a nice chunky yarn like this one. It just makes it easy to see what you're doing than if you try to start off using a lighter weight yarn which is much finer. So grab your yarn, grab your hooks and let's learn how we create our foundation chain. To begin making the foundation chain, you're going to want to start off first of all and make yourself a slip knot. So the easiest way that I find to do a slip knot is you take your yarn, you'll have the end which isn't attached to anything here over on your left, and then your yarn going to the right. What you always want to do when you're making a slip knot is make sure that you leave a long enough loose end, so 4 or 5 inches, just so when you complete your project you can sew that in at the end and it just keeps your work nice and secure and nice and neat. So when you've got your yarn laying down with the end to the left, you leave yourself 4 or 5 inches and you take your right hand and you pick up your yarn and you just make a loop over that, so that the strand of yarn which is attached to your ball of wool, and the yarn that is attached to your ball of wool is known as your working yarn. So if you see that in a pattern, that's what that means, and you've created this loop and the working yarn is over the top of the loose end. Then you take your working yarn and just slide it underneath that loop and pull it up, and that creates the loop, and if you pull on it, that creates the slip knot for you. Now a slip knot is great because it's completely adjustable, so if you pull on your working yarn it will make the loop smaller, and if you pull on the loop it will make it larger. So don't worry if you think your loop is too big, it is completely adjustable, and likewise if you feel it's too small. Moving on to how we do the foundation chain, you want to grab your hook and pop it into that loop that we've just made. Now it's important that you pop it right onto the hook, past this narrower part of the hook and onto what is called the shaft. So if you tighten it up down here, then your stitches are going to be really difficult to get off your hook and your foundation chain is going to be far too tight. So make sure you pop it right onto the hook at the widest part, just here. Pull on your working yarn, and you want this yarn to be able to move freely up and down your hook, so it's not pulling, it's just gliding up and down. The way I like to hold my yarn is I use my left hand and I pop the yarn over my first 2 fingers, and then under my ring finger and my little finger the yarn goes underneath. So that is how I hold my yarn. So let's do that again. So the yarn goes over my first 2 fingers and under my ring and little finger. You'll then take your middle finger and your thumb and hold on to the bottom of that slip knot that we've just made. So your hook is pointing up towards the ceiling, and what you want to do is push your hook backwards, which pushes the yarn away from you, and then you're going to rotate your hook towards you and down towards the floor, and then just pull that through, just like that. And then you're going to rotate your hook back up to the ceiling and forward, and you want to make sure that just like when we tighten the loop up, this loop that's on your hook is going onto the shaft of your hook, and you're not trying to start another chain when it's down here at the narrower part of the hook. So push it forwards and make sure you get it onto the shaft of the hook, and that'll help create chains which are all in the same size. So again, my hook is pointing up to the ceiling. I'm going to push it away from me, pushing the yarn backwards, and then rotate my hook towards me and down to the floor and pull my hook backwards and pull that yarn through. So let's do that again. So this process where we are pushing the yarn backwards, rotating our hook and pulling it down, that is what is known as yarning over. Now every stitch in crochet you will need to do a yarn over. So if you see it in a pattern, it can sometimes be abbreviated to YO. So if you see that in the future, that's what that is. So let's just slow this down for you. So there's a couple of problems that you can run into when you're creating your foundation chain. You want all your chains to be a similar size. So sometimes if our hand is too far away from our hook and working yarn, this can create an overly tight stitch and you can't get your hook through. So as you're making your chain, you want to make sure you are gradually moving your hand, which is holding your working yarn, up with each chain. And equally, you want to make sure that you're not holding the yarn too tightly with these fingers here on your left hand or too loosely. If you're holding them too tightly, your chains are going to be too small and tight. If you're holding it too loosely, then you're going to end up with really big chain stitches, sort of like that. And you don't want that. You want them all to be a nice size. Now it is just all practice. So let's do a couple more. So I'm going to push my yarn away from me, rotate my hook yarning over, grabbing onto that yarn and pulling it through and push my hook forward. Yarn over, pushing the yarn away from me, rotating my hook towards me and down and pull through. Yarn over and pull through. Yarn over and pull through. So it's always a really good idea when you have done your foundation chain for your project to just double check before you go up to row 1 of your project, especially if you've got a long foundation chain. It's better to correct any mistakes before you move up to the next part if you've done too many or too few foundation stitches. So how we count how many chains we've got. The loop that is on the hook will never count as a stitch, so you don't count that one. So let's show you where our stitches are. I'll take my hook out of that one. So as we're looking at our foundation chain from the top, you can see these 2 strands of yarn which look like a letter V. Each of these V's are a chain stitch and they're what you count in for 1 stitch, all the way down until you get to your slip knot, which obviously doesn't count as a chain or a stitch, and you're not going to be working anything into that one. So let's count up how many we've got here. So here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 and 15 chains. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you do have any questions or you're struggling with the technique, then please leave me a comment below and I'll try to answer your questions as best I can. But apart from that, enjoy it. It's a learning process. This is something new that your hands aren't used to doing at the moment. So the more we do it, the more muscle memory we get, and everything will just click. It's just practice. Just enjoy the process. So I'll see you all real soon. Take care and happy hooking.